All right. Hello, 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 everybody. It looks like we are live. And we are together here today to talk a little more about how to effectively lead donor meetings. So, welcome, welcome. As folks are just sifting in to join us, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. If we haven't met yet, my name is Emma Lewzey, and I help fundraising teams develop the skills, the strategies, and the systems they need to raise more major gifts. So I would love to hear from you. If you're just joining us, let me know, drop a comment below, and let me know where you are joining us from. Love to hear from you. I'm going to take a quick sip of my water. It's been one of those days, maybe you can identify, of many, many back-to-back meetings and calls. So I think 'tis the season for that. So go ahead and let me know where you are joining us from. And if this is your first time joining us, I'll talk a little bit about how these sessions work. Hello, Nick, nice to see you. And I see Leah from Victoria, welcome, welcome. So one of the best parts of these sessions, if you are joining us live, is it gives us an opportunity to interact together. And I love this so much about these live sessions. Welcome, Florence. I love this about these live sessions. So I'm going to have a lot of questions for you as we go through. I would love your input, because one of the best parts about this session is not only am I bringing my 25 years of major gift expertise to the table here, but I also find when everybody's participating, the wisdom in the room is amazing. We come up with some amazing ideas and comments. So please be encouraged to participate. I'm already so excited because I'm seeing so many people diving into the comments. Welcome, Stephanie, Sharon, Kevin, Pam. We've got a lot of folks joining us today. Krista, thank you for coming. So I also wanted to mention, a lot of folks catch up on the replay because not everyone can join us live. And if you're here for the replay, what I'd love you to do is use the hashtag replay in the comments, because I always come back and read what you have to say. I answer if you've got any questions. So please do, if you're catching up on the replay, take part too. All right, my friends. So if you're just joining us, we're talking today about how to effectively lead donor meetings. And this is something that I often talk about learning the hard way when I was first starting out in my career. So I didn't necessarily have access to a lot of mentors, a lot of training. Starting out 25 years ago, the landscape was a little different. So I spent a lot of time learning the hard way about how to have a donor meeting. So here is what would happen to me often in the early days. I would go out and I would meet with a donor. We would have lunch and we'd have a perfectly pleasant conversation. I'd talk a little bit more, find out what, their travels had been like, what the grandkids are up to. Maybe I'd give them an update about the program they were supporting. And before I knew it, it'd be time to be settling up the tab and saying our goodbyes. And it was really leaving me thinking, what just happened, right? What just happened? So I don't know if you also had that experience. I'd love to hear from you. If you have had that experience of having a perfectly pleasant meeting that isn't quite leading to the impact or outcome you're hoping for, I want you to go ahead and drop a yes below. Go ahead and drop a yes below. I guarantee you, if this is you, you are not alone. You're going to be in lots of good company here, because this is a very, very common mistake. So what I learned the hard way is it's really crucial to make the decision to actually actively step into a leadership role in your donor meetings. And let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that. Oh yeah, I'm seeing the yeses coming in. Yep, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Because there's a good reason for this. We're told that donor meetings are the absolute gold standard when it comes to raising major gifts, but nobody's necessarily breaking down for us exactly what we need to be accomplishing in those meetings, right? So I'm feeling I'm feeling like I'm in good company seeing all these yeses coming in. And if you too have a little bit of work to do on your donor meetings, then you are definitely in the right place. So let me talk about this first and really important shift, and then I'm going to dive into exactly what this looks like, because I think that's important as well. So, the shift of stepping into a leadership role in our donor meetings is absolutely essential in turning our conversation into major gifts opportunities. And I like to be really specific when I'm talking about stepping into a leadership role, what I mean. So when you're stepping into a leadership role in your donor meetings, you're really going to be intentional about how you're using your time with a donor, right? This is ensuring that every interaction you're having, whether it's in person, whether it's on the phone, is really purposeful and aligned with your broader goals, right? This is really important. So for me, this really starts with planning ahead and thinking really strategically about our time with donors, right? So let's see what's going on here. I got some notes and I got them out of order. All right. So I think, all right. Yeah, so let's talk about stepping into a leadership role in the, yes, here we go, my friends. I have so much I want to tell you. I've got like 5 pages of notes. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the importance of planning ahead. All right, getting your notes in the right order, right? So here's key number 1, this idea about planning ahead. I don't know how many of you actually do this, but what I really like to recommend is that you sit down ahead of every donor conversation and really be thinking strategically about your time together. That for me starts with setting very clear goals about what you want to achieve with your time together. This can actually be helpful before you even book the meeting. I don't know about you, but I've heard from a lot of fundraisers, they're finding it increasingly challenging to actually land the meeting in the first place. So when you're backing things up and understanding why you want to meet with the donor, what your goal is, this also enables you to be more transparent up front, be really clear about why you're seeking the meetings and the outcomes you're looking for. So this is really important. You're thinking about clear goals. You're doing this ahead of time. This is going to really help you stay focused and ensuring that both your needs, the organization's needs, and the donor's needs are going to be met, right? So what happens when you walk into a meeting with a very clearly articulated plan? A lot of things, right? In that case, you're typically equipped better to actually guide the conversation. And that's an important part of stepping into that leadership role, is that you really are taking the time to strategically guide this conversation and guide the discussion in a way that is mutually beneficial and productive, right? So this is what we want to shift from being a participant in a meeting to really stepping into that leadership role. And planning is really important, right? I had someone raise a really interesting comment when I actually posted about this a couple of weeks ago. This session was really inspired by a post that I did that turned out to be my most popular of the whole past year. And a lot of folks were asking me for more information and to dive a bit deeper into what I meant about leading a donor meeting, being more strategic. So here we are today. But somebody brought up a really great point, is like, things are inevitably going to spin out of our control in a donor meeting. Like, we can plan all we want, but guess what? Having a plan actually makes it a whole lot easier to pivot. Even when things do end up going not according to the plan, we do have the plan. It enables us to think on our feet, pivot, and shift things a little bit. So I am actually just going to, as we do this, read some comments and wisdom from the room, which I find really helpful. So Faith is just sharing, like, what a good idea to plan ahead before you even call them, right? So if you're having a challenge actually landing those meetings, maybe back it up before you even call them, that you've got a goal in mind for the end of that meeting. Then you can be really clear about that. So Faith recently emailed someone for a meeting and gave a few dates in the future. She got a call back right away and said, let's meet right now. This is a dream scenario, or maybe a fearful scenario, depending on your style. But this is also a new prospect, Faith. This is fascinating. So it just really shows you the value of planning ahead, not only in getting the outcomes in the meeting you want, but in landing the meeting in the first place. I love this, Faith. I really appreciate you sharing this information. And here's the great end to the story. A donation was received on the call, and it was 2.5 times the amount that Faith had planned to ask for. I love these success stories. I love these stories that are actually coming straight from the front lines of fundraising. So this is great. I love that. So if you're thinking about what is the outcome of me spending the time on planning my meetings, I want you to think about this scenario in which there was a donor who wanted to book a call immediately and actually ended up giving 2.5 times the amount that was planned to ask for. Love that story. Okay, so really important to go into things with a well-defined plan. I think we all agree on that, and understanding that. I love this. So, and please go ahead as I'm chatting if you have any experiences to share, because this is sometimes, like I often say, there's lots of juicy conversations going on in the comments because folks are sharing their experiences, good and bad ones. And these are really helpful and inspiring, right? Okay, so Nick is just saying, know who you are, what you do, and how the donor investment can positively impact the cause. I love this. Now, this is very interesting because this actually connects really nicely, Nick, into the next thing I wanted to talk about, because sometimes you're actually going into a meeting and you don't know these things about the donor. But what I want to say is these meetings are a great opportunity to find this out, right? So I'm going to segue right into key number 2 after key number 1, the importance of planning ahead. Key number 2, planning ahead enables you to strategically guide the conversation, right? So let's say you are in a situation you don't know a lot about a donor. This is going to be a really important part of you leading the conversation in a meaningful way. So you're steering this conversation like towards your goals, right? There is so much more, I think we've already established this, about building relationships than just developing like those warm feelings, even though those are really nice and necessary too. But, you know, we want to make sure we're not leaning too heavily on something like establishing, you know, common interests, because, you know, 8 times out of 10, this might not actually be possible with your donors. So just making sure that we're being really strategic about guiding that conversation. And a key here really is the power of a great question and the power of a strategic question. So I'm going to keep talking about this, but I actually want to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. What is your favorite question to ask in a donor meeting? I find a lot of us have favorites. I'm going to share mine, but while I'm chatting, I'd love to hear from you. What is your go-to question? Do you have a favorite question that you love to ask in a donor meeting? Go ahead and share your wisdom with us. I like to say I'm a bit of a question collector because I think the value of strategic questions in our donor conversations is immense. And over the course of time, I've heard from folks so many amazing questions. And this is a really important part of your toolkit for donor meetings, right? So when it comes for me to coming up with questions to ask the donor, again, I like to go back to my goal, because as I was saying earlier, it's great to be prepared to go into those meetings and know everything you can about the donor. But you are often, especially at the beginning of the relationship, going to have a lot of gaps. And that's the beauty of a meeting like this, is it gives you the opportunity to fill those gaps, but only if you're planning and asking the right strategic questions. So I actually include this as part of my plans. I like to map out like 3 to 5 strategic questions, keep them in my back pocket. I'm not a robot reading from a script, but I like to understand, what am I trying to achieve and what questions might help me get there. So if I'm new to meeting this donor, I really like to understand a little bit more about like, what is, you know, how did they first get involved? What is motivating their philanthropy, right? What's motivating their support? And really getting them to talk about that in their own words. There's such immense value in that. So one of my favorite questions, already dropped it. What are you hoping to achieve with your philanthropy? And you may think, well, you know, maybe it's a little too late if I know a donor really well and I've never gotten to that deep values-based questioning, deep values-based conversation. But in my experience, it's actually never too late. right? So if you haven't, even if you know a donor really well, understanding the deep values-based motivation of why they're giving, it exists for everybody. Absolutely. So I love this. We're seeing some great questions. I'm going to go ahead and read some of these out to help you build your question toolbox as well. Oh, hold on. I love this. Oh, okay, great. So Brian shared the question, what are the issues in our community that weigh on you? So I think I'm putting my own spin on that. But what are the issues in our community that weigh on you? Nick is sharing, what's most important to you and your family about the causes you support? You can see how different these are. You might use them at different stages, and you might use them for different goals, right? Depending upon what you're working towards. Sarah is sharing, where do we fit in your picture of yourself as a philanthropist in our community? Love these questions. All right. Greg's sharing that there's a colleague that has a different approach. But I have a lot of success asking, what's your why? I like that. And Greg, I'm really glad that you raised this, because I think what is really important in building your toolkit of strategic questions that you can use on a donor meeting is making sure that it feels really natural and comfortable for you, right? You don't want to be like awkwardly sounding like you're reading from a script. And there's a way to put a spin on almost every strategic question that is gonna feel right for you. It's gonna be comfortable, made it a little practice, but it's gonna sound like the way that you talk. So don't think that you need to be reading from a script, but once you do that thing of understanding what goal you want to achieve, the questions can come naturally, and you can phrase them in a way that's really, sounds like it's in your own words. Erin sharing, what do you want to be doing more of? I love that. Where is there a gap we can help you address? Faith, one of my favorites, how did you first get involved? If I'm just meeting a donor, love to hear that origin story. Amazing. Oh my goodness. I'm like, Faith, you're sharing another story about a donor giving 2.5 times more than usual. Is this another donor that's increased their gift by like 2.5? Because I'm getting very impressed right now. And said that it's like getting that donor to actually talk about why they started supporting, especially for longtime donors, really ended up stirring up some really fond memories of like the original values that ended up like driving the first connection, and ended up again 2.5 timesing the gift. I love this. All right. Yeah. What inspired your first gift? That's a favorite too. What are you hoping to achieve with your philanthropy? Pam and I, we share a favorite strategic question. I love this. Laura's got a great question about, it's hard to naturally integrate these kinds of questions into a conversation. So that's something that also takes like a little bit of practice, right? And I'm going to give you a pro tip that I actually have not planned on giving you, but I think it's really important. And that tip is, I really want you to be like cultivating your sense of curiosity before you're going into donor meetings. So I actually like work, when I say cultivate, I actually work on this where I'm thinking like, oh, like I'm really curious. This is why starting with the goal is helpful. I'm really curious. I don't know a lot about this donor. Like, I wonder, like, what's their why? What's motivating their giving? And sometimes in building up that sense of curiosity, that can really help leading into naturally feeling a little more comfortable introducing these questions. And I actually sometimes will lead with that. Like it feels very natural for me, but I'd be like, I'm really curious. What is it? How did you originally get involved? I'm really curious what it is that is motivating your generous support. Like, what are the values that underpin that? So this can take a bit of practice. Like, we aren't necessarily trained in how to do this. So sometimes what I recommend is that you start practicing this maybe with lower stakes meetings. When I say lower stakes meetings, that sometimes just means maybe it's a donor that you're already a little more comfortable with. And that you really are practicing this in an active way and developing questions that feel comfortable for you. So like for me, asking great questions is just a part of creating a meaningful conversation. And I actually see this is another important point I want to bring forward. I actually see practicing the skill of asking strategic questions as a really important part of the value that you're bringing to the table with your donors. Because this is another important shift, again, that I hadn't actually planned on sharing, but as I chat, things are coming to me. And the thing that is coming to me is that oftentimes when we're going into booking and leading our donor meetings, we do it in a way that doesn't bring the mindset of, I'm bringing value to the table for this donor. So that's something also to work on, not only cultivating your sense of curiosity, but actually making that reframe of, this meeting is not only valuable for me because I'm understanding the donor, this meeting is actually incredibly valuable for the donor because I'm going to be leading it strategically in a way that's helping them maybe articulate things that they've never thought about before or spoken about before. So I really want you to also be bringing into your meetings, in addition to making your plan, setting your goals, and creating those strategic questions, I want you to be thinking about cultivating that sense of curiosity and also thinking about, what is the value I'm bringing? Or even just boosting yourself to be saying, like, I am bringing value, and this is why. Because too often we go into our donor meetings thinking this is a very one-sided experience in which I'm imposing upon the donor, and that is absolutely not the case. So we've gotten some good tips. As I said, the wisdom of this room is very impressive. So we've got some really great tips. The idea of role playing with a colleague, right? Or role playing with someone you're really comfortable with. I have literally practiced asks in the mirror. So, doing a little bit of work with yourself in the mirror. I totally identify too as an introvert, for anyone who's been following me or working with me for a while. And I often say that introverts actually make the best major gift fundraisers. That's maybe for another session, but if folks want to hear about that, maybe that can be a subject for an upcoming session. But really, while being an introvert can make it feel more challenging, you're actually naturally inclined typically to perhaps like be a little quieter, spend a little bit more time listening, versus our extroverted colleagues. And this comes straight from my extroverted colleagues' mouths. I'm not saying anything, I'm not telling tales out of school, but my extroverted colleagues will tell me, actually, the challenge for me in donor meetings is not getting carried away and talking too much, because I get really excited, right? And so I may go into too much pitching or too much talking versus the being quiet, asking great questions and listening. All right, so we're getting some great ideas in the comments. I'm not going to be able to read them all out because we're going to run out of time, but I love this. So do go through the comments to see lots of great wisdom here, right? I'm hearing introverted, extroverted introverts. Yeah, extroverted introverts. Yeah, so definitely, I think, we both bring strengths to the table, and I'm loving this. I'm thinking maybe this is a good topic for an upcoming session. Let me know. I love your feedback. So let me make sure I am covering off everything I wanted to. So we're having some great, oh yes, here's my most important pro tip that I need to get to next time. So we're talking about making the plan, setting the goals, making sure that you're asking strategic questions that are aligned with your goals to kind of get you to that mutually beneficial outcome. And a couple of added insights in terms of cultivating your curiosity, and also, just getting some practice. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. Using questions in a way that feels comfortable for you, and recognizing introvert or extrovert, you're actually bringing strengths to the table, different strengths to the table. And also, my very important one is just working on that mindset of really understanding what immense value you're bringing to the table for the donor. Because I'm going to say a little bit more about that because I think it's so important. Because quite frankly, no matter how big the donor, they actually can achieve the change in the world that they want to see without partnering with an organization like yours. Right? So you really are enabling the donor to be more effective, to achieve their dreams in many cases, to be living their deeply held values. And if you ever struggle with feeling like, what is the value I'm bringing to the table, spending a little bit more time on that, I think can be a real game changer, right? I think it can be a real game changer. So I love this. I love this conversation. All right, so I wanted to wrap us up. I usually like to get us out of here in about 30 minutes. So I've got 5 more minutes to talk about what I will call, I often say this is the secret sauce to my, the secret sauce or the magic to the most effective meeting is that I'm going to get this put on a t-shirt. I never leave a meeting without an agreed upon next step. So this is kind of the final, the final tip for you to have really effective donor meetings, is to make sure that you are always leaving your meetings with a next step. That could be big, it could be small, it could be tiny, but I always like to conclude that and wrap the meeting up by reflecting a little bit back of what I heard and proposing a next step that's mutually beneficial and aligned with some of what I heard. I will often actually create a bit of a thesis or create a bit of like an idea when I'm doing my plan. What could be the next step that I'm actually going to be proposing at the end of this meeting? So I include that when I'm making a plan. I actually do write out plans for my major donor meetings. And in fact, when I work with my clients, we work with my strategic donor meeting template. That's something that I work with clients on in order to make sure that we really are thinking about absolutely everything strategically we need to from start to finish when it comes to using our time wisely with our donors, right? So that's the final thing I like to do, is make sure that I'm concluding with a mutually beneficial next step, that I'm proposing that in the meeting, and that I'm getting agreement on that. So one of the things that can be a little tricky when you're doing this is sometimes you're planning ahead and the next step by the end of the meeting is completely different than the next step you had planned for. I think that's okay, and it happens fairly often, but I think in having thought through the plan and thought through that you want a next step, that actually enables you then to kind of be doing a little bit more thinking on your feet. Say like, okay, I know I need to close with the next step. So let me think of what I'm proposing here, right? So let me know in the comments, do you use next steps, closing with next steps in your meetings? Love to hear from you if there's kind of common next steps. They can vary widely, right? They can vary widely depending upon where the donor is in terms of your relationship building with them. They may be getting very close to make a gift. So your next step may in fact be, let me put together some of what we talked about today on paper into a draft proposal so I can get your feedback. It could be a variety of different things, but we just really want to make sure that we're looking ahead to the next step and that we're getting agreement upon what is going to be happening next. Because I've heard from many folks that typically what often tends to happen is we might have a great meeting and we leave that meeting and everyone feels great. And then we're like, oh no, what's next, right? So, and it can be very hard. So when you're face to face and the feelings are good and the conversation is flowing, it's the most strategic time to plan a next step. Erin says, yes, right? The next step, if the next step is in my court to deliver, I always like to overestimate delivery so I can exceed expectations and start off on a positive foot. I love this. This is a really good tip as well. Make sure that you're not over promising and under delivering, especially if the delivery is a proposal, a document, something that the ball is in your court. Ideally, the ball for the next step will always be in your court. That's helpful in many ways. You need to be able to make sure that you're enabling this. Even if the ball is in their court, for example, I've had meetings where I've had discussions with people and it's come out that their family is really an important part of their philanthropic decision-making process. And they really want to involve their kids and their grandkids, for example. So even though the ball is to some degree in their court, I'll take it back into my court, right? So I'll say, oh, okay. Well, how does this sound as a next step? Why don't we make sure, that we get the grandkids involved why don't we bring them in for our next meeting and we can go for a tour or fill in the blank there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up with you within the next couple of days to see if we can set some dates to do that. So I always like to take the ball back into my court, whether it's naturally there or not, so that I am getting both agreement from the donor, but I'm also making sure that the next step is mine, right? Does that make sense for folks? All right. I love this. I love this. So that is my final tip for you. So let me do like a bit of a quick recap because we covered a lot today. We really covered a lot today. And I love hearing all of the interesting examples in the room as well. So we talked about a few things. We talked about the importance of planning ahead and actually like creating a written plan that can be really helpful. Right? We talked about the importance of strategically guiding the conversation, making sure you're using your strategic questions to do so, and that you're leading towards a goal that you've established in your meeting planning process, and that you never leave a donor meeting without a next step. Could be tiny, could be enormous, but never leave a meeting without the next step. You can get your t-shirt here. I haven't actually made a t-shirt yet, but I just love that. That's my favorite tip. All right, my friends. So if you have found this session helpful, I do these each and every month. We cover a lot of different topics that relate to major gifts. I want to invite you to sign up for my newsletter because I send invites out here. I also send replays out to the list. You can find that at Blue Sky Philanthropy. Let me see here. Oh, blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe, blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe. And I'll make sure you get an invite the next time that we do one of these sessions. I'm also just going to go back and make sure I've caught all of your comments. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Pam. I'm so glad that you found this session helpful. I've really, really enjoyed delivering it to you. And I'm always interested if you sign up to my newsletter. Next time I email you, if you have a topic that you want me to cover on this next live session, let me know. I'm really interested in what you're interested in finding out about. And in fact, as I mentioned, this session came out of a lot of comments and questions I got in talking about the importance of stepping into a leadership role in your meetings. So wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, knowing it was of interest to folks. And so good to see you all. Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch and hope to see you next month. And good luck with all of these tips. Let me know how they work for you. If you're like Faith and you start landing some gifts that are 2.5 times as large as usual, I want to hear about that too. All right, my friends, we'll talk to you soon.